So I want you to imagine, just for a second, that your body is this multi-billion-dollar high-security smart home.
Right, like an absolute fortress.
Exactly. And for, hundreds of thousands of years, the internal alarm system in this house worked absolutely perfectly. I mean, a window gets broken by a virus, the sensors detect it instantly, the alarms blare, and a highly trained biological SWAT team just kicks down the door to neutralize the threat.
Yeah, they fix the window, the alarm resets, and the house just goes quiet again.
Right. It's this incredibly elegant, refined system.
I mean, it really is the pinnacle of evolutionary engineering, if you think about it. The capacity to mount a rapid, localized defense that is literally the only reason human beings survived in a pre-antibiotic world.
Because it was filled with, pathogens and environmental hazards and all that.
Exactly. Without that acute response, a simple laceration would have been a death sentence.
But, and here's where we get into the meat of today's deep dive, right now, for millions of people listening to us today, a phantom glitch has infected the smart home.
A really persistent glitch, yeah.
Yeah, the sirens are blaring at maximum volume. The emergency sprinkler's been running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for years.
Which is just a disaster for the foundation.
Exactly. And while you might not see the water damage on the outside right away, that constant low-grade flooding is slowly rotting the foundation of the house from the inside out.
That is a perfect analogy.
So, welcome to today's deep dive. If you are joining us, you are someone who doesn't just want like a basic list of health tips to treat your symptoms. You want to look under the hood.
You want the actual mechanic.
Right. Today, we are decoding this massive stack of clinical data and research on what is definitively the root cause of almost every major modern disease. We are taking a microscope to systemic inflammation.
And we really, really have to emphasize that word, right? Systemic.
Not just a swollen ankle.
No, exactly. We are not talking about localized acute inflammation. We need to fundamentally reframe how we view this entire process. Because, the goal today isn't to demonize the immune response.
Right? Inflammation isn't the bad guy by default.
Far from it. Inflammation is, at its core, this magnificent, vital healing tool. The real tragedy of human biology in the 21st century is that this incredibly fine-tuned mechanism has essentially been weaponized against us.
It is the ultimate biological betrayal. And I actually want to speak directly to you, the listener, for a second. Have you been dealing with this unexplained, crushing fatigue that coffee just doesn't touch?
Or maybe your gut is constantly volatile.
Yeah, bloating unpredictably. Or do your joints feel like rusty hinges when you roll out of bed, even when you haven't worked out?
Brain fog is another huge one, making 2 p.m. feel like midnight.
Right. So we are going to explore the compelling scientific reality that these are not random, isolated medical anomalies. They aren't just, quote unquote, getting older.
No, they are the physical manifestations of a single systemic fire burning inside your cellular walls.
Which means before we can look at the highly effective, scientifically validated ways to extinguish that fire, and we will definitely get to those, we have to understand the cellular mechanics of the alarm system.
We need to know exactly why the sirens get stuck in the on position in the first place.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So let's bypass the basic stuff. We all know what happens when you sprain an ankle, right? It swells up, it gets hot.
Acute, localized macrophage action, that is just the body doing its job.
Right. But the clinical data we are looking at points to the cellular level, specifically these biological messengers called cytokines.
Yes, cytokines are the key here.
So when there is a breach, these cytokines are released. But they aren't just like passive dispatchers on a radio, are they? They are actively altering how our cells behave.
That is the crucial distinction to make. Cytokines are these small proteins secreted by cells of the immune system, and they act as chemical messengers.
Okay.
But they don't just float around yelling for help. They physically bind to specific receptors on the surface of your cells.
Like a key in a lock.
Exactly like a key in a lock. When a pro-inflammatory cytokine, something like interleukin-6 or tumor necrosis factor alpha, when it binds to a cell receptor, it effectively hacks into the cell's nucleus.
Wait, it literally hacks the nucleus?
It alters genetic expression right then and there. It tells the cell to completely change its function to support a defensive war effort.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and in severe cases, it can even trigger apoptosis.
Which is what? Programmed cell death.
Right, programmed cellular suicide, just to prevent an invader from utilizing the cell's resources.
Okay, I have to push back here for a second because this is where the logic just seems to fall apart for me.
Okay, lay it on me.
If this cytokine response is an ancient survival mechanism, something that evolution has ruthlessly optimized over millions of years, right?
Right.
Then why is our biology suddenly so fundamentally broken that it can't flip the switch off? I mean, if the house is flooded, why hasn't evolution weeded out the glitch that keeps the sprinklers running?
Well, because your biology isn't broken at all.
It's not.
Not even a little bit. It is functioning exactly as it was designed to. The issue is an evolutionary mismatch.
Okay, what does that mean?
So the immune system is ancient, right? But the environment you are exposing it to right now is entirely novel. Your biological alarm system evolved to deal with acute, finite stressors.
Like a tiger attack.
Exactly. A tiger attack, a bout of dysentery, a broken femur. You either survived it or you died. But either way, the stressful event ended.
The alarm turned off.
Precisely. But today, the stressors never end. Your immune system has absolutely no evolutionary framework for, say, a synthetic trans fat.
Or a microplastic molecule.
Right, or the chronic psychological dread induced by a 24/7 news cycle on your smartphone.
So the body just interprets all of that novel modern input as a persistent infection.
Yes, it senses cellular stress, it senses oxidative damage, and it reacts the only way it knows how, by deploying pro-inflammatory cytokines. And because you are continuously exposed to these novel stressors, you eat heavily processed food every day, you breathe polluted air every day, you sit rigidly at a desk under artificial light every day.
The threat never leaves.
Exactly. The biological threat never actually leaves. Therefore, the immune system is never given the signal to stand down.
Man, so we are effectively keeping our bodies under constant simulated siege.
That is exactly what it is, a simulated siege.
Which leads us to the reality of the damage. When these cytokines remain chronically elevated, circulating through the bloodstream for months or years, they start degrading healthy tissue.
They do.
But if this cytokine fire is constantly hacking our cells, how does it actually manifest in your daily life? I want to challenge the vagueness of the symptoms mentioned in the research.
Sure.
Because things like fatigue and bloating, they just seem incredibly ambiguous. Like anyone can be tired.
They seem ambiguous until you look at the mechanism of action behind them. So let's take persistent fatigue.
Right.
When we say chronic inflammation causes fatigue, we are not talking about a lack of sleep. We are talking about mitochondrial diversion.
Mitochondrial diversion, explain that.
Well, when your immune system is chronically activated, it requires massive amounts of energy, huge amounts. The body literally reroutes ATP, which is your cellular energy currency. It reroutes it away from your brain and your muscles to fuel the production of immune cells.
Wait, really? So it's stealing your daily energy to fight this fake war?
Exactly. Your mitochondria are essentially ordered to stop powering your daily life and start powering a never-ending internal war.
That makes so much sense. I mean, it explains why your limbs literally feel heavy when you're going through this. It's a literal energy diversion tactic.
It is.
But what about the digestive issues? The data points to chronic bloating, diarrhea, and irritable bowel syndrome. How does the cytokine fire cause that?
Well, the gut is ground zero for the immune system. Nearly 70% of your immune system is located right there in your gut.
70%.
Yeah. And your intestinal lining is only one cell thick, held together by these proteins called tight junctions.
Okay.
So chronic inflammation triggers the release of a protein called zonulin, and zonulin physically breaks apart those tight junctions.
Oh no, so it literally opens the gates.
Exactly. This creates intestinal permeability, which is often called leaky gut. And when that happens, undigested food particles and bacterial endotoxins leak directly into your bloodstream.
Which I'm guessing instantly triggers another massive immune response.
You got it. It pours more gasoline right on the fire. It's a vicious cycle.
That is wild. And then there is the skin. Rashes, stubborn acne, eczema. Why would a fire in my gut show up on my face?
Because the skin is your body's largest excretory organ.
Okay.
So when the liver and the kidneys become totally overwhelmed by the systemic inflammatory burden and the sheer volume of circulating immune complexes.
They just can't keep up with the trash removal.
Exactly. So the body attempts to purge these toxins through the skin. Those dermatological issues are rarely just cosmetic.
They are the smoke from the systemic fire showing up on the surface.
Perfect way to put it. And when you add in the reality of frequent infections, where your immune system is so exhausted from fighting phantom, environmentally induced threats, that it has zero reserves left to fight off, like a basic rhinovirus.
You just have complete picture of biological burnout.
Total burnout.
But here is the critical question for the listener right now. How do I know the difference?
Between what?
If I eat a huge, heavy meal and I'm bloated, or if I'm tired because I pulled an all-nighter for work, how do I distinguish between normal, acute human discomfort
Sure.
and this deeply rooted, chronic inflammatory response?
That is a great question. You look at the chronicity and the baseline shift.
Okay, break that down.
If you eat a massive meal and feel bloated, but your digestion returns to normal the next day, that is an acute mechanical reaction to volume.
Right. Normal stuff.
And if you work an 80-hour week and feel exhausted, but you bounce back after a long weekend of deep sleep, your recovery mechanisms are totally intact.
So what's chronic inflammation look like?
Chronic inflammation is entirely different. It is the bloating that happens every single day, regardless of what you eat.
Oh, I see.
It is the joint stiffness that greets you every morning before you've even moved a muscle. It is the fatigue that lingers behind your eyes even after 9 full hours of sleep.
So it's a baseline shift.
Yes, it is the shifting of your biological baseline toward constant dysfunction, independent of any acute events.
The baseline shifts. The alarm is just humming permanently in the background. Okay, so we've diagnosed the threat, we understand the evolutionary mismatch and the systemic nature of the cytokine storm.
We know what we're up against.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, we have to talk about how to extinguish it. And before we get into the high-tech biohacking or the clinical therapies, we really have to address the most immediate environmental input we control.
Which is what we are swallowing every single day.
Exactly. We have to look at the fuel.
And this is where the clinical data is overwhelmingly clear. Diet is the foundational lever for cooling the body down.
Yeah, the clinical consensus points heavily toward protocols like the Harvard Health anti-inflammatory diet, right? Which is designed from the ground up to reduce oxidative stress and actually alter the fatty acid composition of your cell membranes.
Yes. And it focuses heavily on specific whole foods, dark leafy vegetables, berries, walnuts, and critically fatty fish like wild-caught salmon and sardines.
But it also comes with a completely non-negotiable avoid at all costs list.
Not a consume in moderation list.
Right, a complete elimination of highly processed foods, refined carbohydrates, and specifically trans fatty acids and seed oils. Now, I have to jump in here and play devil's advocate regarding the fats.
Let's do it.
Humans have been cooking with and consuming animal fats, butter, lard, tallow, for thousands of years without suffering from these modern epidemics of chronic disease.
Very true.
So why does a modern manufactured trans fat or an industrialized seed oil cause a cytokine storm when a massive slab of beef fat historically doesn't?
It all comes down to molecular structure and enzymatic recognition.
Okay, walk me through that.
Animal fats, like tallow or butter, are natural, stable, saturated fats. Our bodies have the exact enzymatic hardware required to break them down, utilize them for cellular energy, and incorporate them into cell membranes smoothly.
Because we evolved eating them.
Exactly. Trans fats, on the other hand, are synthetically created through a process called hydrogenation.
Right.
They literally blast hydrogen gas into vegetable oils under extreme heat and pressure to make them solid at room temperature.
Basically, they are chemically re-engineered to extend shelf life in a grocery store.
Exactly. And because their molecular structure is completely foreign to our evolutionary biology, we completely lack the specific enzymatic keys to cleanly metabolize them.
Oh, wow. So what happens when we eat them?
When these synthetic trans fats are incorporated into the lipid bilayer of your cells, they make the cell membrane incredibly rigid and dysfunctional.
So the cell wall itself gets messed up.
Yes, and the body literally registers the synthetic cellular structure as damage. The immune system looks at it, thinks it's a foreign invader, and attacks it by deploying the cytokine cascade.
Wait, really? So consuming a trans fat is literally tricking your own immune system into attacking your own cells because it thinks the cell is contaminated?
It is the absolute definition of an unforced biological error.
Yes. That is terrifying.
It really is.
But let's look at the flip side. Let's look at the fire retardants. The research heavily emphasizes omega-3 fatty acids, like the ones you get from that salmon or from a high-quality fish oil. Mechanistically, what is the omega-3 doing that actually puts the fire out?
Omega-3s are fascinating because they don't just passively block inflammation, they actively resolve it.
Okay, how so?
When omega-3 fatty acids are metabolized in the body, they're converted into these highly specialized molecules called resolvins and protectins.
Resolvins. I mean, the name literally implies resolving the issue.
And that is exactly what they do. Resolvins actively bind to the receptors on those pro-inflammatory macrophages and instruct them to stop producing cytokines.
So they turn off the siren.
They do. They signal the immune cells to clean up the cellular debris and vacate the tissue entirely. They are the biochemical all-clear signal that tells the biological SWAT team to pack up their gear and go home.
Wow.
And the problem is, most people eating a standard modern diet have a massive overrepresentation of inflammatory omega-6 fatty acids and a severe deficiency in omega-3s.
So fixing that ratio is really the first step to turning off the alarm.
Without a doubt.
The data provides a very simple, highly practical application for this, actually. A daily anti-inflammatory morning smoothie.
Oh, yeah, that's a great protocol.
You just blend dark berries, which are packed with antioxidants called anthocyanin spinach, chia seeds for those omega-3s, and a heavy dash of turmeric.
A super easy way to start the day.
Definitely. But what really caught my eye in the research wasn't just the food, it was the hydration protocol. Because it isn't just about drinking water. The data is incredibly emphatic about mineralization.
Yes, the salt.
Adding a pinch of high-quality sea salt like Celtic salt or Baja Gold to your water. Why? I mean, why do we need the salt?
Well, we have to understand how water actually gets into a cell. It doesn't just passively wash in like water flowing into a bucket.
It doesn't.
No, it requires an osmotic gradient. The fluid outside the cell needs a specific balance of electrolytes and trace minerals to interact with the fluid inside the cell.
Yeah.
If you are exclusively drinking heavily filtered reverse osmosis or completely demineralized water, that water often just passes right through your extracellular fluid and is excreted by the kidneys before it can effectively hydrate the intracellular environment.
So it's like pouring water on incredibly dry, compacted soil. It just runs off the surface instead of soaking into the roots.
That is precisely what it's like. High-quality sea salts contain upwards of 80 biologically essential trace minerals.
80.
Yeah. And when you add a pinch to your water, those minerals act as the electrical charge that pulls the water through the cell membrane, allowing the cell to properly maintain its volume and, crucially, flush out the toxic metabolic waste that contributes to cellular inflammation.
That makes total sense. But if we want to talk about the ultimate cellular flush, we have to look at the absolute peak of the hydration data. The sources point to a massive repository of peer-reviewed clinical trials. You can actually find them compiled at hydrogenstudies.com/ that look at the biological impact of molecular hydrogen water.
Oh, this is one of my favorite topics.
This isn't just some wellness trend, right? This is a highly targeted, selective intervention. What makes hydrogen the smart bomb for inflammation?
It really comes down to two things: size and selectivity. Molecular hydrogen gas, H2, is the smallest molecule in the known universe.
The smallest.
The absolute smallest. And because it is so unimaginably tiny, and because it is neutrally charged, it can effortlessly diffuse through every single cellular barrier in the human body.
Really? Anywhere?
Anywhere. It passes freely through the blood-brain barrier, it slips right through the cell membrane, and it penetrates directly into the mitochondria, which, as we know, are the powerhouses of the cell.
Right, the exact place where the actual oxidative stress is being generated.
Exactly. As your mitochondria generate ATP, they naturally produce free radicals as a byproduct. Now, some of these free radicals, like nitric oxide or hydrogen peroxide, are actually vital signaling molecules that your body absolutely needs.
So not all free radicals are bad.
Correct. But others, specifically the hydroxyl radical, are highly toxic, aggressively reactive, and deeply inflammatory.
And this is where the hydrogen comes in.
Yes. The brilliance of molecular hydrogen is that it is totally selective. It completely ignores the beneficial free radicals, but it specifically hunts down and neutralizes the cytotoxic hydroxyl radicals, converting them instantly into harmless water inside the cell.
Wow. It neutralizes the exact molecule causing the damage without any collateral damage to the healthy pathways.
It is brilliant biochemistry.
And the practical application here is incredibly accessible too. The data points out you can use an Echo water bottle to generate this hydrogen gas directly into your drinking water throughout the day.
Yep, very easy to use.
Or, if you want something ultra-portable, there are hydrogen tablets that cost less than $1 a day. You just drop them into any bottle of water, let it dissolve, and drink it.
I use them all the time.
But there was a specific scenario highlighted in the research where hydrogen water was deemed absolutely critical, and that was during air travel.
Oh, air travel is brutal on the body.
Walk me through the biological timeline of a typical 5-hour commercial flight. Why is that specific environment such an inflammatory disaster?
Well, a commercial airline flight is basically a perfect storm of evolutionary mismatch. Let's look at the timeline.
Okay.
Within the first hour, you are locked into a pressurized metal tube at 35,000 feet. The cabin pressure is artificially maintained at the equivalent of about 8,000 feet above sea level.
Like being on a mountain.
Right. This immediately induces a state of mild hypoxia, meaning your blood oxygen saturation drops. Your cells immediately sense this lack of oxygen as a physiological stressor.
So the alarms are already starting to hum just from the altitude.
Yes. Now, by hour 2, because you are largely immobilized in a cramped seat, your lymphatic system, which relies almost entirely on muscular contraction to pump waste fluids out of your tissues, it just grinds to a halt.
So the trash starts piling up.
Exactly. Metabolic waste begins pooling, and simultaneously, the cabin air is stripped of almost all humidity, leading to rapid insensible dehydration. Your blood literally becomes slightly more viscous.
It gets thicker. And what about the radiation aspect? The research mentioned cosmic radiation.
Yeah, that's a big one. At 35,000 feet, you have lost the vast majority of the protective shielding provided by the Earth's atmosphere. You are being bombarded by a significantly higher dose of ionizing cosmic radiation.
Which does what?
It directly cleaves molecules in your body, instantly generating those highly toxic hydroxyl radicals we just talked about.
Oh, man.
So you have hypoxia, lymphatic stagnation, severe dehydration, and radiation exposure all compounding simultaneously.
The immune system must be panicking.
It reacts violently, flooding the bloodstream with cytokines.
But dropping a hydrogen tablet into your water over Kansas.
By doing that, you are flooding your cells with a highly bioavailable selective antioxidant that can intercept and neutralize those hydroxyl radicals in real time. It drastically lowers the inflammatory burden before you even touch down in New York.
That is an incredible visualization. It makes total sense why that would be a non-negotiable travel protocol.
I never fly without them.
Okay, so we've established the dietary fuel. We've replaced the inflammatory trans fats with resolving omega-3s. We've mineralized the water, and we are deploying molecular hydrogen.
The foundational stuff.
Right. We've effectively put out the fire in the gut in the bloodstream. But we have a major structural problem to address next. The brain is walled off by the blood-brain barrier. How does the body extinguish neuroinflammation when the cytokines are locked in the vault?
Ah, that is the million-dollar question.
We have to look at the physical maintenance modes: sleep, stress, and movement.
And sleep is the undisputed cornerstone of neuroinflammatory clearance.
Let's talk about the lymphatic system, because this blew my mind.
Yeah, for decades, scientists didn't fully understand how the brain cleared metabolic waste because it lacks a traditional lymphatic system. But recent discoveries have mapped out what is called the glymphatic system.
Which is what?
It's a macroscopic waste clearance system specifically designed for the central nervous system.
And the most fascinating part of the research is that this system is almost completely inactive while you are awake.
Correct. When you are awake, your brain cells are highly active, consuming immense amounts of energy and generating toxic byproducts, including a protein called amyloid beta.
The stuff associated with Alzheimer's.
Exactly. But it is only when you enter deep, slow-wave sleep that the magic happens. During deep sleep, the glial cells in your brain literally shrink in size by up to 60%.
Wait, they physically shrink.
They physically contract. This dramatic cellular shrinkage opens up the interstitial spaces between the brain cells, allowing cerebrospinal fluid to rush in and effectively wash the brain, flushing out the amyloid beta plaques and inflammatory cytokines.
And where does it all go?
It drains them right into the circulatory system to be processed and eliminated by the liver.
So sleep isn't just like resting your eyes. It is an active mechanical power washing of your neural tissue.
A literal power wash.
And the clinical data states that 7 to 9 hours of quality sleep is the absolute minimum requirement for this biological dishwasher to run a full cycle. If you shortchange your sleep, the amyloid beta builds up, neuroinflammation spikes, and the long-term result is a direct trajectory toward cognitive decline, Alzheimer's, and dementia.
Which is exactly why optimizing the sleep environment is paramount. You have to remove the environmental friction that prevents the brain from entering that deep, slow-wave state in the first place.
And the research gives us a hyper-specific blueprint for this sanctuary. Complete darkness, blackout curtains, and an eye mask.
Yep.
No eating within 2 hours of bed so your digestive system isn't consuming energy. But I want to zero in on 2 extremely specific environmental controls.
Let's hear them.
The first is temperature. The protocol explicitly mandates keeping the sleeping environment at exactly 68 to 69 degrees Fahrenheit. Why the obsession with that specific number? I mean, why not 72?
It comes down to the mechanics of the circadian rhythm and hormonal cascades. In order for your pineal gland to release a massive pulse of melatonin, which is the hormone that initiates the deep sleep architecture, your core body temperature must physically drop by about 1 to 2 degrees Fahrenheit.
Okay, and how does it do that?
Your body accomplishes this by vasodilating the blood vessels in your skin, specifically your hands, feet, and face, to dump core heat into the surrounding environment.
So it uses the skin as a radiator.
Exactly. But if the ambient temperature of your room is 72 or 73 degrees, the thermal gradient between your skin and the air just isn't steep enough. Your body struggles to dump the heat.
So you stay too warm.
Right. The core temperature doesn't drop efficiently, the melatonin cascade is delayed or blunted, and your nervous system remains slightly elevated, desperately trying to thermoregulate instead of powering down the glymphatic system.
And 68 degrees is the magic number.
68 degrees is the clinical sweet spot that allows that biological radiator to work effortlessly.
The mechanics of that are brilliant. It's so much more profound than just, being comfortable.
Oh, it's pure physiology.
But the second rule in the sleep sanctuary protocol is the one that really demands an explanation. The data states unequivocally that you must unplug electronics, not just turn them off, that actually unplug them, and keep them at least 6 feet away from your head while you sleep.
Yes, the 6-foot rule.
What is the mechanistic aha moment here? How does a lamp or a cell phone charging on my nightstand physically keep my cytokines elevated?
We have to look at the intersection of biology and physics, specifically the reality of our bioelectricity. Human cells operate on electrical gradients.
Okay.
We have these things called voltage-gated calcium channels on our cell membranes that are highly, highly sensitive to electromagnetic shifts. When you have a device plugged into the wall right next to your head, it is emitting a 60 hertz alternating current electromagnetic field, or an EMF.
Basically, an invisible sphere of electrical static.
Yes. And while the scientific community still actively debates the macro long-term oncological effects of non-ionizing radiation, what is biologically undeniable is that our cellular hardware evolved in an environment with a baseline electromagnetic frequency of essentially 0.
Just the natural resonance of the Earth.
Right. There is very compelling mechanistic data suggesting that sleeping inside a strong artificial 60 hertz electrical field can physically vibrate those voltage-gated calcium channels on the cell membrane.
Wait, so the field physically vibrates the cell?
Yes, and this microvibration forces calcium ions into the cell at inappropriate times. The cell interprets this influx of calcium as an oxidative stressor.
It's keeping the cell in a state of vigilant defense.
Precisely. It subtly agitates the nervous system, preventing the deep downregulation required for the parasympathetic nervous system to fully take over.
Wow.
And the reason the protocol specifically says 6 feet away is based on the inverse square law of physics. The strength of an electromagnetic field drops off exponentially as you move away from the source.
So just moving it across the room fixes it.
By moving that charging phone or that lamp 6 feet away, you effectively reduce the EMF exposure to near 0, entirely removing that invisible static from your cellular environment.
That completely changes how I view my bedroom. It's not just a room. It's a biological recovery chamber.
It absolutely should be.
So we have sleep dialed in. Let's look at the other foundational pillar of maintenance, movement. The clinical recommendation is 150 minutes of moderate intensity exercise per week.
Pretty standard advice. Yeah.
Right. But again, let's go beyond the standard exercise is good for you trope. The research specifically highlights the power of brisk walking, claiming it might be the most overlooked remedy in modern medicine.
Yeah.
Why is a simple, low-impact walk so incredibly potent at stopping a cytokine storm?
Because of the mechanical release of myokines?
Myokines.
Yes. When you physically contract your skeletal muscles during a brisk walk or a cycling session, the muscle tissue actually acts as an endocrine organ. It synthesizes and releases its own highly specialized signaling proteins called myokines into the bloodstream.
Okay, what do they do?
These myokines have a profoundly different agenda than cytokines. They are powerfully anti-inflammatory, they circulate systemically and actively suppress the production of pro-inflammatory interleukin-6.
So the simple act of contracting your muscles is effectively flooding your bloodstream with a natural biological fire retardant.
That is exactly what is happening. And furthermore, the physical pumping action of walking is literally the only way to move fluid through your lymphatic system.
Because there's no heart for the lymph system, right?
Exactly. If you sit at a desk for 10 hours, your cellular waste simply stagnates in the tissues, creating an incredibly toxic inflammatory environment. Walking is the mechanical pump that forces that waste into the liver and kidneys for elimination.
And that ties perfectly into the final pillar of foundational maintenance: stress management. We talked earlier about how the brain interprets psychological stress as a physical threat.
It does.
The clinical protocols heavily emphasize breath work and mindfulness to control cortisol. But I want to ask about cortisol. It's often labeled the stress hormone, but in acute situations, isn't cortisol actually a powerful anti-inflammatory?
It is a phenomenal anti-inflammatory. If you are chased by a predator, your adrenal glands flood your system with cortisol, which instantly shuts down inflammation so you can flee without your joints swelling up.
So why is it bad now?
The problem, again, is the evolutionary mismatch. If your HPA acts as the communication loop between your brain and your adrenal glands, if that loop is constantly triggered by work emails, financial stress, and traffic, you are chronically soaking your immune cells in cortisol.
And just like a type 2 diabetic develops insulin resistance from too much blood sugar.
Exactly. Your immune cells develop glucocorticoid resistance. They simply stop listening to the cortisol. The anti-inflammatory brake line is effectively cut, and the cytokine storm rages completely unchecked.
So how does breath work fix that?
Specific, slow diaphragmatic breath work acts as a mechanical override. By intentionally slowing your breathing, you physically stimulate the vagus nerve, which immediately forces the autonomic nervous system out of sympathetic fight or flight and back into the parasympathetic rest and digest state.
Halting the chronic cortisol drift.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've covered the massive foundations. Eliminating inflammatory dietary fuel, optimizing hydration with minerals and molecular hydrogen, mechanically clearing the brain via deep sleep, releasing anti-inflammatory myokines through movement, and overriding the stress response with breath work.
That's the baseline.
Right. Now, we are entering the final section of the clinical data. This is where we move beyond maintenance and into active, targeted interventions. Things you can do to aggressively force the body to heal at a cellular level. We are entering the realm of biohacking.
My favorite part.
And the first modality here is something that has practically become a cultural phenomenon. Cold exposure.
Yes, cold water therapy. The deliberate, acute application of extreme temperature.
Now, the research makes it clear that you don't need a $10,000 custom ice bath to achieve this. You can trigger the biological cascade simply by turning your home shower to its coldest setting for 30 seconds to 3 minutes at the very end of your normal routine.
Yep, cold showers work perfectly fine.
But I have a major physiological pushback here.
Okay, let's hear it.
If we have spent this entire deep dive establishing that chronic environmental stressors like bad food, toxic air, and EMFs are the root cause of inflammation, why on earth would I subject my body to freezing water? Isn't dumping a bucket of ice water on your head a massive physiological attack? Why doesn't an attack heal us?
It is a phenomenal question, and the answer lies in the concept of hormesis.
Hormesis.
Yes. Hormesis is a biological phenomenon where exposing the body to a brief, acute, low dose of an environmental stressor, a stressor that would be lethal if sustained for hours, actually triggers a massive beneficial adaptive response.
So it is the literal biological embodiment of what doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
It truly is.
So it's the difference between chronic, low-grade stress that slowly rots the foundation and a sharp, intense alarm that immediately strengthens the entire system.
Precisely. When that freezing water hits your skin, cold thermoreceptors instantly send a shockwave of panic to your brain. Your brain responds by triggering an enormous acute release of a neurotransmitter called norepinephrine into your bloodstream and your central nervous system.
And what does norepinephrine do?
It is incredibly powerful. Clinical data shows that a massive spike in norepinephrine directly and aggressively suppresses the production of inflammatory cytokines like TNF-alpha.
Wow, it effectively suffocates the inflammatory cascade. And the data also noted the vagus nerve connection here, right?
Yes. The shock of the cold, especially when applied to the face and neck, forcefully stimulates the vagus nerve, which we know is the superhighway of the parasympathetic nervous system. Over time, regular cold exposure dramatically increases your vagal tone.
And why is that important?
High vagal tone is one of the absolute strongest clinical correlates to low baseline systemic inflammation.
It's like doing a hard system reboot on a frozen computer.
Yeah.
You intentionally crash the biological software with a freezing shock to clear the corrupted cache and reset the baseline operating system.
That's a great way to think about it.
And the behavioral aspect of this protocol is brilliant. If you do this for just 7 straight days, it becomes a lifelong habit because your brain becomes literally addicted to the massive mood-elevating rush of dopamine and norepinephrine that follows the cold shock.
You step out of the shower feeling invincible. And it is a deeply profound intervention that costs absolutely nothing.
Which contrasts nicely with the next clinical biohack we need to dissect. Though the technology is becoming much more accessible for home use, it relies on highly sophisticated cellular mechanics. Red light therapy, also known scientifically as photobiomodulation.
Yeah, photobiomodulation is fascinating.
The research on this is staggering. The data highlights using full-body LED beds in clinics or high-powered at-home panels to bathe the body in specific wavelengths of red and near-infrared light. The stated benefits are massive. It penetrates deep into the tissues, accelerates cellular healing, and supports the production of collagen, elastin, and fibrin in the skin.
All true.
But the most crucial detail the clinical research emphasized is that photobiomodulation fundamentally improves microvascular circulation, specifically the critical blood flow supplying major organs like the liver, lungs, pancreas, kidneys, and the eyes.
Yes. And if we really want to understand the profound systemic impact of red light therapy, we have to look past the surface level skin benefits and dive deeply into that specific term, microvascular circulation.
Let's unpack it. What exactly is the microvascular network, and why is it failing when we are inflamed?
When we think of the circulatory system, we typically picture our major arteries and veins, the massive multi-lane highways pumping high volumes of blood out of the heart.
Right.
But the vast majority of our circulatory system actually consists of microvessels, capillaries that are so microscopically tiny that your red blood cells actually have to fold themselves in half just to squeeze through them single file.
That's incredible. They are the incredibly narrow, winding dirt roads that finally reach the individual houses.
A perfect analogy. These tiny capillary networks are the actual delivery endpoints where oxygen and nutrients are finally dropped off to the cells, and they are the pickup points where cellular metabolic waste is collected.
Okay, so what happens when there's inflammation?
When your body is trapped in a state of chronic systemic inflammation, the endothelial lining of these tiny vessels becomes damaged, constricted, and blocked by the constant cytokine crossfire.
So the dirt roads are blocked with debris.
And when the dirt roads are blocked, your major organs, your liver, your kidneys, your pancreas, literally begin to starve for oxygen at a cellular level, and they simultaneously begin choking on their own metabolic waste.
That sounds disastrous.
It is. This localized tissue hypoxia drives even more inflammation, accelerating the progression of organ disease.
Okay, so how does shining a red light on my skin fix a blocked capillary inside my liver? We need a mechanistic analogy here because it sounds like magic, but I know it's biochemistry.
It comes down to a mitochondrial traffic jam. Inside the mitochondria of your cells, there is a specific enzyme complex called cytochrome C oxidase. It is the crucial final step in the electron transport chain that produces ATP energy.
Okay, cytochrome C oxidase.
However, during times of chronic stress and inflammation, a molecule called nitric oxide can bind to cytochrome C oxidase, essentially parking in the exact spot where oxygen is supposed to go. It blocks the receptor, the mitochondrial engine stalls out.
The parking spot is stolen, so oxygen can't do its job.
Exactly. But here is the brilliance of photobiomodulation. Specific wavelengths of near-infrared light, usually around 810 to 850 nanometers, can physically penetrate through your skin, through the underlying tissue, and directly into the cells of your blood vessel walls.
And what happens when the light hits the cell?
This specific wavelength of light is perfectly absorbed by cytochrome C oxidase. When the light hits the enzyme, the photonic energy literally kicks the blocking nitric oxide molecule out of the parking spot.
Wait, it forcibly ejects the blockade?
Yes. Oxygen immediately rushes in, binds to the receptor, and the mitochondria instantly resume maximum ATP energy production.
That's amazing.
But even more importantly for the circulatory system, that nitric oxide that was just kicked out is a potent vasodilator. As it is released into the vessel wall, it forces those tiny, constricted microvessels to instantly dilate and open up wide.
So the red light is effectively utilizing photonic energy to chemically widen the microscopic dirt roads, allowing the folded red blood cells to finally flow freely again, bringing massive amounts of oxygen directly to the starving liver and flushing out the toxic, stagnant waste.
That is exactly the mechanism.
That is absolutely incredible. It ties perfectly back to our core premise of clearing out the inflammatory fire by restoring the cellular supply lines.
It is localized, non-invasive healing that exerts a massive systemic impact on overall longevity and organ function.
And to wrap up the active interventions, we need to touch on the targeted supplementation that clinical research backs up. We already did a deep dive into the absolute necessity of omega-3 fatty acids from high-quality fish or algae oil
Huh.
to balance that dangerous omega-3 to omega-6 ratio and deploy those resolvins.
Right.
But the data also emphatically highlights the power of certain roots, specifically turmeric and its active compound, curcumin.
Ah, curcumin. Yes.
The research actually makes a staggering claim here. It says that clinical studies have shown high-dose curcumin to be as effective at reducing inflammation as some heavy-duty pharmaceutical non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. How is a bright orange root outperforming a laboratory-designed chemical?
Because it operates at the exact same enzymatic level, but often with broader action. Pharmaceutical anti-inflammatories typically work by blocking a specific enzyme pathway called KOX2, which is heavily involved in the production of inflammatory prostaglandins.
Okay, so they block KOX2. What does curcumin do?
Curcumin, through its complex evolutionary biochemistry, doesn't just passively mask the pain. It actively interrupts that exact same COX2 inflammatory pathway at the enzymatic level.
So it does the same job.
But furthermore, it acts as a master genetic switch, down-regulating the expression of multiple inflammatory genes inside the cell nucleus simultaneously.
So it goes even deeper than the drug.
It is a multi-targeted biological intervention that has literally evolved alongside mammalian physiology for millions of years.
What strikes me most deeply about all of this, and really this is the core takeaway of everything we've unpacked today, is the profound accessibility of this biological revolution.
It really is accessible to almost anyone.
You do not need to be a Silicon Valley billionaire to fundamentally biohack your biology and put out the fire. Yes, you can buy an expensive red light bed, but taking a cold shower at the end of your routine is completely free.
Brisk walking is free.
Using breathwork to stimulate your vagus nerve and control your cortisol is free. Re-engineering your sleep environment to 68 degrees and moving your phone across the room costs absolutely nothing.
Even the supplements are highly accessible.
You're right. Dropping a molecular hydrogen tablet into your water costs less than $1 a day, and adding a pinch of Celtic sea salt to hydrate your cells costs pennies. We're looking at profound, highly mechanistically proven, cellular-level interventions that are available to almost every single person listening to this right now.
And that is exactly where the true lasting value of this deep dive lies. Knowledge is fascinating, but it is only truly valuable when it is deeply understood and practically applied.
Exactly.
The cellular mechanisms of chronic inflammation are undeniably complex. We've talked about cytokine storms hacking the nucleus, the glymphatic system washing amyloid beta from the brain, voltage-gated calcium channels vibrating from EMFs, and cytochrome SAMP oxidase traffic jams, but the environmental interventions required to fix them are remarkably simple and deeply intuitive to our biology.
We have been on an absolutely massive journey today. We started by fundamentally reframing our perspective, realizing that the crushing fatigue, the stubborn eczema, the brain fog, and the volatile gut issues are not random, isolated diseases you just have to live with.
They are the systemic smoke from a single, deeply rooted cytokine fire alarm that has been glitching for years.
We learned exactly how to stop throwing gasoline on that fire by ruthlessly eliminating synthetic trans fats and how to spray biological fire retardant by adopting the Harvard Health dietary protocols and deploying omega-3 resolvins.
We completely redesigned the physical maintenance of the body. We looked at the absolute necessity of optimizing the sleep sanctuary, dropping the ambient temperature to facilitate the melatonin cascade, and removing the invisible, agitating electrical static of EMFs to allow the nervous system to truly surrender.
We explored the mechanical power of daily movement to flood the body with anti-inflammatory myokines and the necessity of diaphragmatic breathwork to break the cycle of cortisol resistance.
And finally, we armed ourselves with targeted active interventions. We looked at how to force a biological reboot through the hormetic stress of cold exposure, violently stimulating the vagus nerve.
And we explore how photobiomodulation uses light energy to clear mitochondrial traffic jams and physically dilate the microvascular highways feeding our most vital organs. It is a comprehensive, multi-pronged, scientifically validated strategy to take back absolute control of your cellular health.
Making just a few small, consistent changes from the vast amount of material we've covered today is truly all it takes to significantly shift your biological baseline. It is entirely possible to dramatically improve your health span, drastically lower your risk of chronic degenerative disease, and elevate the quality of your daily physical existence.
It simply requires aligning your daily modern habits with your biology's ancient evolutionary expectations.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Which brings me to a final provocative thought I want to leave you with as we wrap up. We spent this entire deep dive talking about the mechanics of how to fix and cure systemic inflammation. We treat it like an enemy to be vanquished.
Right.
But if chronic inflammation is directly and exclusively triggered by the artificial lights we stare at, the chemically synthesized foods we ingest, the constant psychological dread of the modern news cycle, our sedentary isolation, and the toxic chemicals in our environment, are we actually treating a medical disease at all?
That is a profound question.
Or are our magnificent, highly evolved bodies simply having a completely logical, natural, and entirely appropriate physiological reaction to the deeply unnatural, profoundly alien modern world we've trapped them in? Could the ultimate, final cure for inflammation be as staggeringly simple as just remembering how human beings used to live?
Something to really think about.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the fire within. Go take a cold shower, get some real sunlight on your face, unplug your phone tonight, and we will see you next time.